Insightful session at the Ahmedabad International Book Festival 2024. Today we gather under the theme and also the topic of Mette's book, Narratives, the Stories That Hold Women Back at Work. A topic that resonates deeply as we navigate the complexities of gender dynamics in professional spaces. It's my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speakers for this session. First, we have Mette Johansson, an inspirational leader, and alongside her, we have Saumya, who, apart from being a brand and communication professional, is driven by her passion for the world of prose and poetry. Saumya is also a self-proclaimed poet, bathroom singer, and the poster child of laughing at embarrassing moments, and also the oldest sibling in the household to two notorious but warm and kind species. Her words, not mine. Get ready for an engaging conversation that promises to challenge perspectives, inspire action, and pave the way for meaningful change. Without further ado, let us welcome our speakers, Mette Johansson and Saumya Jha.
Hello, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I hope you're having a great time. I'm sure that you are, surrounded by this wonderful, wonderful scenic view. Um, Mete and I have known each other for a few months now. I have read the book, of course, and it resonated deeply with me. I could relate to it as a corporate professional, as someone who's looking to build a career for herself, and mostly as a woman. Mete has a way with words, and you'll see why in a few minutes from now. Um, Her book, what it does is it leaves you with a few questions. It helps answer some questions that you may have had, but you were too afraid to ask. It also helps you answer questions that may never have crossed your mind yet. So it has done that for me, and I sit here holding a couple of questions in my hand, waiting to just grab onto this opportunity and make sure that I ask you as many questions as possible, because I'm sure that you'll help me, you'll just help me answer them. So let's start. Without any further ado, I'll start with my first question, which is something that I'm sure everyone here is waiting to hear. Um, Mete, how did narratives come about? And I'm also very curious about why narratives as a title.
Okay, how did it come about? Now, I have worked in corporate life. I worked in corporate life for about 15, 20 years before I left corporate life 10 years ago to build my own company. And it wasn't the easiest of paths, I must say. I worked for the same company as my husband, and my husband was carried around on a silver platter from one leadership seminar to the next, one promotion after the next, and I got more and more frustrated. I stopped believing in myself as a leader. And it wasn't until I left corporate life, again out of frustration of not getting the jobs that I wanted to have, that I realized that there were a lot of things that were stacked against me as a woman working. It was a German company, Germany is a quite conservative country. It was in the chemical industry. The chemical industry is also quite conservative. And then I worked in Japan on top of everything for also 6 years. So I had a lot of conservative factors stacked against me. And the book came about in a conversation with a client of mine, an HR lead for a multinational company. After a workshop, we chatted a bit and we made a list of things that we realized were nonsensical that were said in that workshop and also beyond the workshop. And that is why I called the book Narratives, because they are stories, they are narratives that we say over and over and over again without paying too much attention to whether they're truthful or not. And when we keep on repeating things, they become the truth in their own right. And that is what this book is about. It is about making sure that we don't take everything just for granted. What people are saying is not always the truth. Let's step back. Let's sometimes think slow, as Daniel Kahneman says in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Let's think slow more often and consider what are the stories that we're telling ourselves and others.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. Speaking of narratives, there's one narrative that I would like to discuss with you. What I've always seen, what I've seen in workplaces especially, is that when men are stern at work, they are thought to be assertive. They're thought to be confident. They're thought to be maybe slightly strict, but good at their job. But when women are stern at work, they're thought to be aggressive or rude or arrogant or maybe difficult to work with. What are your thoughts on this? Is it something that we're overthinking, or is it something that actually exists? Because I would like to know how we can tackle something like this. How can we overcome it?
You're absolutely right. It is a phenomenon. It is a phenomenon that women have a very narrow corridor of accepted behavior, where if we're too nice, we're not strong enough. And if we're a little bit more assertive, we become too much of a B word, right?
Yeah.
It is very difficult to get things right as a woman. And that is because women are, as little girls, we're taught to be nice. We're always told to be nice much faster than boys are being told to be nice. If you have two rowdy kids playing along, right, they're running around, shouting, you've got one boy, one girl. It's a girl who's being told first, be a nice girl, take care of other people. So we are taught all the time that we have to be nice. And also, this is what the world then perceives us as, having to be nice. So when we're not in that role of being nice, all of a sudden it doesn't fit into our worldview, men and women, any gender. So that is why it's so difficult for us to be leaders, because leaders need to be more assertive. And I mean, I could speak about this forever. One of the things, I do a lot of women in leadership workshops as well, and very often we have to start with convincing women that they can be leaders. They don't necessarily see themselves as leaders. Why? Again, because the picture of a leader is often defined by how men would tend to act in the workplace. And when women don't fit to that picture, we don't see ourselves as leaders. So that is the first thing we need to do, is to make sure also that women see themselves as leaders. A fun story from one of my workshops. It happens every single time we have the session about your big, audacious goal. I get women to define their big, hairy, audacious career goal. There will always be a few women in the room who will say, I don't really have a big, audacious goal. I'm actually happy at the level I'm at. Now, the first time I heard somebody say that, my argument or my comment to that was, what if you were a man? What would your career goal be if you were a man? And it was amazing. She picked up her pen and she started drafting her big, audacious career goal. And now, of course, every single time that I get that same comment of, I don't really have a big career goal, I say exactly the same, and the same thing happens over and over again. So it's not that women are not ambitious. It's simply that we've been told to hold our horses, to not think too big, to not be too bold. So those are lots of different aspects. As an answer to your question, yes, it is difficult for women to make sure that we hit that right path.
And I think we also have to try a little harder every single time when we're trying to take another step. Talking about women are nice. We often talk about women being too emotional, and that's also the first chapter in your book, Women Are Too Emotional. And I wouldn't take it away from them. I am a woman, I am emotional, but at the same time, I'm also confident. And so are the women that I work with, so are the women that I'm surrounded by in my workspace. Most of the people that I work with on a daily basis are women. My manager is a woman. I work with these wonderful, wonderful, confident, compassionate bunch of women. I live with a few of them in my apartment. I hang out with them. A lot of people here that I spoke to at at Ahmedabad Book Fair and people from the National Book Trust of India are women. And I've had such a gala time with them, and I know how they're like. So when people say that women are too emotional, are they also saying that women are not professional? And if they're saying that, then how can one change it? What can we do about myths like these, which still are very much so prevalent in workplaces?
Women are too emotional to be leaders. I'm sure that some of you have also heard that. And what you're saying is so powerful because it's also that compassion, that passion, that enthusiasm. That's positive, isn't it? If we're compassionate, that makes us better leaders. If we are enthusiastic, it means that we have more drive to do things. So when did it become something negative to have emotions? I don't want to work with a robot. Emotions is positive, in my view, as long as it has a positive impact on those who are around you. And this is where it becomes interesting. Now, one of the women that I interviewed for my book, she's a chief human resource officer in India, and she said, women too emotional? You should see the boys in the boardroom. When they don't get their way, they will slam their fists on the table, they will jump up, they will shout. Women too emotional? Now, and this is where I would like you to think this to an end, because the emotions that are actually negatively impacting people around you have been accepted at the workplace. Shouting, slamming a fist on the table, jumping up, being angry has been considered okay in many workplaces. Whereas being enthusiastic, being passionate, having compassion, that has not been considered okay. What happened there? This is where we get the world completely wrong. We should allow the enthusiasm, the passion, as long as it has a positive impact on people around you. Live those emotions. Be proud of your team. Show them that you're proud of your team, of people around you, even if you're not a leader. That is what we need to change and bring more compassion, passion, enthusiasm, pride into the workplace. And regardless of whatever gender you are, let's all just embrace those emotions. I've had many conversations also with men who are afraid of embracing some of these emotions that might be considered too feminine because they don't believe that that will help them in their careers. The truth is, caring, nurturing, that is also necessary at the workplace, especially in today's age.
Talking about men in workplaces, you know, I've always been encouraged, motivated, supported by the women in my life, but the men in my life have also played a very, very important role. For example, to just start with, in my household personally, my dad always supported me and my sister as much as, if not more, than he supported my brother. He'd make sure that when we would ask for a book, he would bring us 10. He'd make sure that we read, we studied as hard as possible. He sat with me one night before the exam and he would teach me every single chapter line by line. And he would make sure that he studies it before he continues to teach me so that he's on par with it. And he's one of the most brilliant men I know. He has supported me through my life. So has my brother. So has my best friend, who's a guy. So have the men in my team, the men in my workplace. So there are so many men who continue to be allies to us. And there's so much. So I know for a fact that this is possible. It is possible for men to be allies to women in workplaces. And I'd just like to know from you, how can they be allies, especially in workplaces, of course?
Before I answer that, I'd love to also address the many men that are in the audience today, because yes, it is a gender issue and we need all genders in order to address this. It cannot be that men are not in a conversation about gender equality. We all need to take part in this conversation. And what you're saying is so powerful that your father has supported you. In fact, a lot of women, Indian women that I've been speaking to, they say that they're where they're at today because they have had husbands, they have had fathers, they've had brothers who supported them. it seems to be a much bigger phenomenon also in India than in other countries. And I do work almost globally, at least Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia Pacific. And it is really, India stands out in terms of men who are also supporting women. So back to how can men support women better? It is, of course, being aware of what are some of the ways where the culture, the organization, the systems, the processes, or even the people are discriminating. And standing up, speaking up against this. One very typical phenomenon at the workplace in meetings, Jane says something, she has a brilliant idea, shares it with the rest of the room. 20 minutes later, Jack says exactly the same. And people say, oh, wow, fantastic, yeah, that's a great idea. Now pay attention to this, and when you hear this happening, then please support Jane by saying, that was a great idea that you brought to us here 20 minutes ago, and I'm really happy to see that Jack is further building on that. Stress again, it was Jane who started off with this idea, and it's Jack that's further building upon it. So those are some of the things that men can say. For instance, in the book where I have 10 different myths, 10 different narratives that we say that are nonsensical, when you hear that, also make sure that you stop it in its tracks so that it doesn't get bigger and stronger and multiplies because we're repeating nonsensical things. When we say such as, oh, but she wouldn't want to have a career because she has children, why not answer, well, have you asked her? If somebody says, oh, but women can't work together, one of the chapters in the book, maybe you also ask, regardless of gender, say, is it women who can't work together, or is it just because people are difficult to put together in a room and get something done? So make sure we speak up, we stand up. In the book, I not only describe the narratives, but I also give some tips and advice of what are the answers we can give, how can we stand up and stop these narratives in their tracks.
There are a few interviews that you've mentioned in the book, and they were quite interesting. Is there an example or a story that you would like to share with us here today? Something that can be an inspiration, something that people can take back home with them? Just maybe one or two stories.
Okay. Now, of course, some stories are not inspirational. They're rather heartbreaking.
Love those ones.
And there is one in particular, Dalia Feldheim. She's a friend of mine. She's also written a book, Dare to Lead as a Girl. And she was talking about how she was also, by her boss, being called out for being too emotional. In fact, in a meeting, he had a tissue box. And when she had a tear, he turned the tissue box around, and on the tissue box, it was for Dalia, written there for Dalia. It was a provocation of you always cry, so I always have a tissue box just for you. Now, she was first brought down. She was having a little bit of a low period in her career because of that, and she left the job. Now, today, of course, she's turned it around, and she's built her own company based on Dare to Lead Like a Girl, which is based on the advertising campaign that some of you might actually know. It was in Procter & Gamble, always had this campaign about Dare to Run Like a Girl. Run Like a Girl, a famous advertising campaign that ran 20 years ago that she was also responsible for in her time at Procter & Gamble. So that today she has turned around to her power and is also talking about, yes, let's own our emotions, let's be passionate, because this is an advertising campaign that has had millions and millions and millions of views on YouTube. Should she not be proud of her passion? That is what developed her, that drove her to develop such an advertising campaign. Now, since we are on the topic of feminine care, another story that I have to share is another person also worked in the feminine care department. And at that point of time, they were all men. And the men used to walk around with sanitary pads in order to get the female experience. Now, if you ask me, it would be a little bit better if you hire women who have this experience very regularly, rather than get men to walk around the office with sanitary pads. So those are some of the ridiculous stories sometimes that you come across. The other one that I thought, I couldn't believe my ears when I heard it first at my company where I used to work. We can't promote her because what if she fails? She will set a bad precedent for all other women, so we can't promote any women. Let's step back and do some slow thinking around what we're saying here. This was a narrative that was told over and over again in the company that I used to work for. And I thought it was a one-off until I heard in one of the many women that I interviewed in one of their narratives that it was exactly the same at that company. Now, how many men do we promote and they fail? Happens all the time, right? So why would we be so scared of having a woman fail if she's promoted? And if we're focusing so much on what if she fails, we might be setting her up for failure. How about we support her success? Let's think about some ways that we can support success. So whenever you hear narratives like that, step back, think slow, and change the narrative. Challenge the narrative, ask questions. One of the ones that I really like that is very easy very often to say is, if somebody says something about a woman, challenge it with, would you say the same if she were a man?
That's true. And it's also very inspirational. It was heartbreaking, but it is also very inspirational. I'd like to ask you, can you share an instance with us where you've spoken to a man, or maybe a man has taken a stand for something, for a woman, where a man has been an ally to a woman in a workplace and done something to change the narrative? Is there a story that we can have around that?
Absolutely. And we wouldn't be where we are today if there weren't plenty of men who are standing up for fairness, who are standing up for the right thing to do. I am not man-bashing, that's not my intention. I sometimes am a bit provocative in the things I say because I want us to think about what we're saying. We wouldn't be here today if we would not have men who would support us, like you mentioned your father just now. Now, there is one leader that I've worked with very intensively. It's one of my regular clients. He is the leader of Asia, Africa, Australia, and he insists on making sure that the company checks the pay disparity. Every single year, they're checking for every other year, every 2 years, is there a pay gap at the company or not? Because even if he's done it 2 years ago, it might still have snuck in. So he does it every 2 years. And in a period of 2 years that I've worked with this company, they managed to go from about 30% to 50% of women in leadership in that company, in that region. We can do things, especially at the top. If you're a leader, you can do so many things to make the world a fairer place for everyone, not just for women.
I'm so thankful to men like those in our lives and in workplaces in general. Before we open the floor for questions, I just have one final question for you, which is, how is the book relevant in an Indian context? And what would you say to the women here in the audience, to maybe women who will be listening to this conversation? What are a few tips that you'd like to give them, and advice about how can they navigate a life in work, in just corporate career, and generally just in life?
I'll start with the one factor that I know is the biggest lever that we have to achieve gender equality or equity in general for anyone. And that is amplifying diverse voices. I run a nonprofit organization called Keynote Women Speakers. and we're on a mission to bring more diversity to speaking stages. And I have seen with all the women that we've trained, we do lots of speaker training in this organization as well. I have seen that when we train women to be confident to sit up here and speak like the two of us are doing today, they speak differently in any situation. At work, at home with friends, family, they speak up differently for themselves, for others, in a very different way. So amplifying people's voices, that is the very first thing we need to do, and everybody's voice needs to be amplified. So that is one thing that I would say to any girl, any woman, anybody who's part of a minority, as we call them, in one way or the other. Make sure that you build on that confidence to speak up for yourself and for others. It's a muscle you can train by doing it over and over again. Not sitting back and thinking, oh, somebody else will probably say it in a meeting. No, speak up in that meeting when you have an idea. And the book is also full of ways, of techniques, tips of how you can gain that confidence in speaking up. You also mentioned the Indian context. Now, I have had so much positive feedback from Indian women from the book, and they could find themselves in so many of the narratives that I'm describing. I see right now that India is in that moment of time where a lot of women are entering the workplace and are getting promoted. They are becoming more senior leaders. They are in government, as we see also from the organizers of this event. There's a lot of women in the leadership teams here as well. Now, in India, right now, more and more women are coming into the workforce as leaders as well. And yet, they typically still have all that household work as a responsibility.
Yeah.
We're typically still project managing the entire household. Even if we have help at home, we might still be project managing the household. You might have a husband who is responsible for, I don't know, packing the bag when the boys have their cricket games, making sure that they have their cricket gear when they go to school in the mornings. Yet, the day that is forgotten, it will be the woman still who's making sure that it is going to happen. Often we take the overall responsibility, and that is brain space, that is a burden that women typically take upon themselves. They typically also arrange for the help, what has to be cooked, what has to be done with the children, and that is one of the reasons why a lot of women step out of that final race for a promotion, because they feel they don't have the energy to do it. And that is one way where if we have more equity in the households, women will also have more equity in the workplace.
What you're talking about is so important because it is also an observation that I have when I see people around me, I see couples around me, and these are people in similar age groups. So I think that, they have a similar background as mine sometimes. Maybe they've had a similar educational journey, similar academic journey as mine. And then I see that once they get married, the women and the man and the woman in the house, both of them still working, they go to office, but the women make sure that the breakfast in the morning is ready, that the lunch box is made. When they come back home, while the man sits and watches the cricket match, the woman makes sure that the dinner is still on the table on time. So I think, of course, there are households where people are making sure that they take initiatives to make sure that there's sort of equality even at home and not just in workplaces. I think this is where it starts. It starts at home. It starts when you see your parent, when you see your father helping out, not just helping out. I actually, this is another thing that I'd like to say. This is an observation that I made during the pandemic, where when all of us were just living at home, all together, all the time, mom would do all the household work because it was she has been a housewife all her life, and she was apparently supposed to do so, right? So we'd see her work day and night. She'd be in the kitchen most of the time. And I started telling everybody, listen, we need to help mama out. We need to make sure that, I cook one meal, my sister can cook one. And we can all help her out. And then that is when I realized we're not helping her out. It's not supposed to be her responsibility, a sole responsibility. It's a shared one. And that is when I stopped saying that, we need to help the women in the house with household chores and with household responsibilities. So, yes, this is something that exists, but people are still taking a step towards ensuring that we can create a more wholesome, a more equal environment, not just outside of home, but also at home. And I hope that we can do it in the years coming forward. I'm sure I'm going to ensure it at my house when I do have one.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly, that helping means
yeah.
that she is still the overall project manager.
Yeah.
And I know that India has more traditional roles still with women and men in the household. Now, I do want to give a positive story here that is with one of the men that I interviewed for the book. In Sweden, a lot of men who are taking paternity leave had the international name of latte daddies, because they would go for a walk with the stroller, the kid in it, have a latte in a cafe and meet up together, because they also went on paternity leave when the women were working. Now, what is happening, according to these men, is that they have a very different bond with their children, that they are appreciating it very much, that they have a different bond with children. They are starting to appreciate it. And it's not just a negative part of, oh, I have to do certain chores. It is about having an amazing relationship also with your own children. So that is one very positive story that's also part of the book.
Thank you so much for sharing all these stories with us. I think we're out of time. Can we open the floor for one question, in case anyone has one?
There's two.
Yes.
I saw two hands.
Hello, very, very interesting presentation. My name is Shailini Shethamin, and I've recently written a book very much about women's position at the workplaces. I think the most important thing in the Indian context that we have been talking about is that, first of all, there has been a dialogue. People should be able to open up, because there's so many women who go through issues at work, having being put down or not getting the right kind of place on the table, and they don't talk. They just back out. And I think that is where it's very, very important. Also, in the Indian context, one of the things are that men can separate their personal life from their work life, and that is allowed. Like, the personal life is kept separately. Women who are working, they have to work their family life and the work life all together, no matter whether you like it or not. Maybe it's the role, and I don't think it is the same in, it's almost the same in Western countries as well, in a certain way, that women get more affected, or their life becomes a kind of a mosaic with home life and work life, which is slightly different from men. And I think those things has to be recognized, those things has to be accepted, and those things have to be dealt with. Many times we don't talk about it, and I think that is one of the worst thing to happen. And especially when we are growing up. I mean, the stories are that only 19% women go back to work. Why is that? Because the working environment is not that conducive for women. And I think talking about it, sharing it all, I think that really, really helps.
Absolutely. The conversation, the dialogue is essential right now. Thank you. There was another question here, I believe.
Hi, good evening. I don't have question, but I just want to share whatever is coming from my heart here, okay? So first of all, a nice conversation, and I admire you to really stand up, identify those narratives. I call it stereotypes, and tell everyone, guide everyone that, hey, pause, step back, and think slow. I think that's a wonderful advice which will help everyone. So great advice there. One great takeaway I'm taking from this as a coach is your conversation on when you ask a lady about her audacious goal and she was not able to put forward a strong feat. The way you flipped that, what if you were a man? I think that's the coaching question I'll always use. So that's a good takeaway for me as a coach. And third thing where I was really actually laughing, so allow me to share this, is when you were talking about that metaphor of men walking with diapers. That was really extreme, but I really, what I do in my corporate life or otherwise is to, even at home, right? My guidance will be to do the role swapping so that you live each other's life, not just men to women, but also women to men, to really get them also what they are going through, right? So just live each other's life for a day or a week or a month, and you will really get all the things what is, what it looks like living in their feet. So that's what I want to call out. Thank you for the wonderful evening and all the learnings.
Fantastic advice. I'm very appreciative of you sharing that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your observations, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this session. A heartfelt thanks to our incredible speaker, Mette Johansson, and our incredible moderator, Saumya, for their valuable insights, experiences, and perspectives. As we conclude, I'd like to invite Mr. Patel from the National Book Trust India on the stage to felicitate our speakers. Thank you very much again, and thank you for joining us. You may now proceed to the cultural stage, right at the other end of the venue for a performance by Kyote Kathakali. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.